How does a bootstrapped founder find funding without giving up a significant chunk of equity? Through founder-friendly non-dilutive debt capital. That's how. Our guest is a seasoned founder, an operator, angel, investor, and a co-founder of Clearco, a fintech startup that provides entrepreneurs with a suite of performance financing. Woohoo! It's Fab Founder Friday on the Startup Life Live Show. Let's glow. And hey, let's do some dancing too. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Startup Life Live Show. I'm your host, Ande Lyons, 4 times founder and startup champion to founders around the world. And after raising 4 businesses of my own, I now really enjoy helping startup founders, especially newly minted business owners, find the solutions and inspirations they need to succeed. And I am so grateful you carved out time to up your founder game. This is how we do it. These are skills that we are building. Nothing's going to prepare you for the founder journey until you start doing the founder journey. And while you're in your seat, you've got to remember to keep upping your game. And we learn so much from other founder stories, right? New solutions or aha moments will send you running back to creating more growth for your business and more success. If you're joining us live or via replay, please click the like button wherever you're watching this video. We are live on LinkedIn, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. And when you click on that like button, it goes out into your stream and into your community. And you never know, there could be a founder there who would really benefit from watching this delicious conversation today. And if you're tuning in on YouTube and you have not yet done so, I would be so grateful for your subscribe love. Look, I am 150 subscribers away from reaching 1,000. And, you know, the algorithm wins on YouTube give you a lot bigger lift when you reach that point. So thank you for helping this humble host get there with your love and appreciation. I also want to say, if you want to receive an alert whenever I post a new show, well, you got to join our meetup group. I mean, check this out. There's the QR code. There's the link. Come on over, join the meetup group, and that way you'll receive an alert whenever I post a new show. And let's face it, we can all grow and learn from all these interesting guests that come on here. There's going to be somebody always that's going to benefit your founder journey. And by the way, if you prefer listening to the show, don't forget you can listen to the Startup Life Live Show via your favorite podcast platform or just clicking the podcast tab on my website. And if you're loving what's going down here at the Startup Life Live Show's mission of amplifying diverse founder voices while serving first-time founders around the world, please reach out to me to learn more about how you can make a greater impact in the global startup ecosystem through sponsoring the Startup Life Live Show. Oh, whew, so exciting. I am ready to introduce you to our phenomenal guest, Mr. Charlie Feng. Okay, so rather than read, I'm going to pull up a little screenshot here, okay, and see if I can do this. Oh, nope, I did not. There we go. Yay! Producing, it's so much fun. Charlie Feng is a seasoned founder, an operator, angel investor, and 6 years ago, along with 4 other talented folks, he co-founded what you're looking at right now, Clearco, a fintech company on a mission to democratize access to capital by removing the barriers between brilliant ideas and brilliant businesses, especially for diverse founders. Now, Clearco has invested over $2 billion into over 5,000 companies across 6 continents. They raised over $600 million in capital along the way. And hello, they funded 8 times more female founders than traditional VCs. Before Clearco, Charlie founded 2 other companies, and today Charlie mentors and angel invests in e-commerce, fintech, SaaS, AI, machine learning startups. We are going to hear fascinating startup stories and learn so much from you, Charlie Feng. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ande. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so happy you're joining me. I got to tell you, I have been a fan of Clearco for a long time. I've watched the company grow because let's face it, not many founders are going to get investment dollars to grow their businesses. They've got to find other ways to grow. So I have just been watching how you have served founders around the world with the incredible products at Clearco. And now I'm excited to find out what you're doing next. But first, please share with everyone, where are you hanging from?
I'm in Ottawa these days, Ottawa, Canada.
Yay! And of course, everybody knows I'm from Boston. And where are you hanging from today? Oh, look, Brent, you got a fellow Ottawan here.
Oh,
Woohoo!
hey, Brent.
Brent is a wonderful founder. He's other abled, and he has a wonderful voice to make sure we are all heard, no matter what we have going on. And hello, LinkedIn user. Sometimes LinkedIn doesn't share the face, so I am waving madly. And everyone, please do not forget, we love to amplify your brand. So pop in the name of your business, your one-liner, your URL. I'll bring it up, and Charlie and I will cheer you on and amplify it, okay? And if you have any questions, pop them into the comment threads as well. We'd love to hear them because, engaging and connecting this way is a wonderful way to grow and learn. All right, Charlie, let's first, I always ask this question because I'm so curious why anyone gives up a steady paycheck and benefits to launch a business, right? So I'd love for you to share with folks what happened to you that you said, nope, I'm going to become an entrepreneur. And of course, I'm always curious, were you already hustling in elementary school? Did you have role models? How did your entrepreneurship journey come to be?
That's a great question. I think it was kind of out of serendipity. It wasn't by on purpose. I think I always admired those who built things, like the creators and the inventors. And whether it was kind of the cartoons I watched from Disney to the games I played, I look up to Steam, to Blizzard, a lot of the big video gamer. And I just didn't know at that time that entrepreneurship was something you could, as a kid, you can make a career out of, or something I could kind of spend my life doing. Raised in a middle-class family, first generation immigrant, and parents worked the same job for 20 years. So I didn't know that was an option until sometime middle of college, when I kind of got my first taste of what I guess being part of a early stage startup, what that was like. That was a possibility. You can make
Was there
something.
like a homework assignment, part of a semester where you had to come up with an idea for a business and with a group of folks?
It was a combination of a hackathon that got me kind of hooked or interested in, you can just kind of build things and people care, as well as was helping out a local startup in Montreal, where that was kind of my first taste.
And what skills did you bring to that?
Yeah, not too many, to be honest. As a student, not that many skills. Just trying to learn and try to.
Was it more on computer science? Was your background coming from a computer science or finance or marketing, growth hacking?
Yeah, I think one of the things that maybe folks underestimate about startups is just that everything is always kind of chaotic. So just willingness to get your hands dirty and build things is very important. So I had a bit of I'd say I know a bit of coding, but by no means I'm not a computer science student, nor am I an engineer by trade. I studied finance, but like corporate finance is a skill set. It doesn't really get applied in startups until much later. So I found myself doing everything from just putting up a landing page to figuring out how to do a Facebook ad. So kind of a bit all over the place.
Isn't that the best part, though, about being young and part of a startup? Come on.
Yes.
I bet that's what really got your juices going, was that somebody didn't lock you into this very narrow lane, right, of being able to share your skills and learn. You had to wear so many hats, which exposed you to a lot and helped you learn a lot about yourself. I love that.
It was that ability that, you see a problem and you can kind of do something about it, and you don't need permission. You can just change it and do it. And hopefully it works. Most of the times it doesn't, but you keep trying.
I think it is the number one common ingredient in every founder, Charlie, and that is they love to solve problems. Right. And get to the solution of things. Yeah. Oh, and Happy New Year to one of my favorite people, Ande Jack. Ande Jack and I used to co-host for 3 years here in Boston. We just stopped our 3-year period of a monthly pitch event for startups here. So we had a blast, so much good times, and he's a world traveler big time. So happy to see you, AJ. Mwah. And okay, Cinecajon, I'm so happy you're here. I have your question all up on a banner because I know you've been looking forward to seeing Charlie and meeting him today and talking about bodyguard.io. And Jeanette, you are, mother of 5, Charlie, okay? Primary parent, solo parent. She tells the great story of, just having to say, look, I've got mouths to feed. I have to figure this out. Yeah. And she has a wonderful company called the Bow Hub. And so 4 of her children are girls. So bows are really important. And she's just hitting it out of the park. And so happy for everybody who also is tuning in right now. Don't forget to share what you're up to and say hi. We love to hear it. So Charlie, I know that you moved along and you start to work places. When did the shift happen that you said, I'm going to either join a team or launch my own business?
Yeah, kind of got a taste of, through a couple of jobs here and there, of kind of what the startup life is, or even it's a possibility. But kind of went the traditional route of joining a big company, kind of working in Toronto, and realized that kind of wasn't it for me. It wasn't, I think and kind of like what you mentioned, that ability to see a problem and be able to influence it very quickly and have that freedom to do so was something that I missed from my experience at a startup. So kind of a year and a bit in, I decided to give it a try. It's like, I'm not getting any younger. It's now or never. So give it a try. And yeah, here we are many, many years later.
Well, and my friends from Boston, guess what? One of his companies before Clearco was based here in Boston.
That is true. I got, we were very lucky. My first kind of idea or company, we got into an accelerator in Boston, where I kind of cut my teeth, learned a lot, made a lot more mistakes, and started there. So yeah, Boston.
Charlie, can we talk a little bit about those mistakes? Because these are the lived experiences that prepare us for getting better and better at stepping more fully into our role as founders. What were some of the glaring mistakes that you made leading up to Clearco that really benefited you?
Oh, there's so many. I think one of the first mistakes and lessons I learned from kind of customer development and kind of figuring out how to find that product market fit is really around kind of listening not only to a customer's words, but also kind of by observing their actions, right? Like actions speak louder than words, and goes back to trying to figure out that right value proposition. So with my first company in Boston, I remember spending hundreds of hours talking to people, and I was like, oh, everyone loves it. Everyone's so validated. Like, I got validation. People love the idea. And then when I was actually built the product and asked people for their credit cards, you start to realize that the real objections start to come out. And I learned a really hard lesson about, kind of the purpose of charging people money when you're building a startup or trying to find product market fit is not really to make a lot of money at that time. It's really to truly validate whether people are willing to put their money where their mouth is at. And that's very important lesson that I had to learn.
Oh, okay. So how many founders out there that have had a few businesses recall the moment that everybody's like, yes, and your surveys, we're on it, we'll do it. And then you launch and it's like, hello, crickets. That's such a good point, Charlie. It's like, yes. And are you ready to put your money into, buying this product and this service, finding that information out and talking to them? That's excellent, outstanding advice. Any other gem that you want to share before we move into talking about Clearco?
Well, one related one to that is just, I think when I give kind of first-time founders or early founders that piece of advice, one of the questions that naturally comes up is, well, the product is fairly complicated, or what I envision is fairly complicated. I can't charge for this just yet, right? And what I encourage is kind of one of the lessons I learned is figure out, there's 2 ways to do this. One is figure out, kind of goes back to the idea of an MVP, a minimal viable product that allows you to charge even something very little, right? Like find out the part of that grand vision and grand product that people are willing to pay even a little bit of money for. The other way to do it is actually to not charge money, but a $0 charge. This works very well whether it's an enterprise sale or a SMB type sale, for example, where you're not really charging them, but you're at least making them put their credit card on the line. And you'll be surprised what kind of reactions you'll find as soon as you ask for that credit card, or as soon as you ask for even a $0 invoice. People will start to kind of give you a bit more of the real feedback that they were wanting to give.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I know, folks, you recall probably, here it's free today, right? But yeah, you need to sign up and you need to slap down that credit card because the charge will be coming. See, I love that. That's perfect. So let's talk about serendipity, right? How did a team of 5 talented folks come together for Clearco? I would love to have been, just I don't want to say fly on the wall, but, in the room when you guys started brainstorming, was an idea that one person had, and then she or he started gathering all of you wonderful people together. How did this happen?
Yeah, I'd say the credits will have to go to my 2 other co-founders, Andrew and Michelle. They kind of had the original idea. They start gathering the rest of us folks. And I think kind of what the impetus for Clearco is that all of us came from fairly diverse backgrounds ourselves, and we had a pretty diverse experience when it comes to starting companies. Some of us have done a lot more venture funding, kind of the traditional venture capital route. Others have bootstrapped their businesses before. So we kind of got to see multiple perspectives when we started talking about, well, how do you do the financing? What we learned very quickly when we started to discuss is that it's the part, no one starts a business to say, oh, yay, I'm so excited to go fundraise, right? No, that's not why entrepreneurs start their own business, but yet most people find a good chunk of their time spent on the road, fundraising, talking to investors. Yeah, we got passionate around the idea of how can we kind of enable the next generation of founders.
Right. And this is so true. And I just love the word democratize access to capital. It's a lofty goal, everybody. But one thing I love about the Clearco founding team is they figured out instruments that would allow them to help founders get the money that would give them the lift up. And I think that you all used a really interesting filtering procedure so that you could do it quickly and find those founders and startups that would best benefit. But I know you went through, all different stage enterprises, et cetera, and supporting their efforts. How did you come up with it? Who had the banking background, or did you all just have to learn it on the fly? And how did you find your sweet spot in who you could fund?
Yeah, I think part of I think one thing that excites me about entrepreneurship in general is that oftentimes coming from a different background kind of gives you a fresh perspective. So none of us were really, ex-banking executives or had that much finance experience. We had some, we understood finance and we understand, fundraising and financing, but none of us really had that much wealth of experience. Now the team, we rounded out the team. We have a very robust kind of finance and capital markets team. But when we started, it was almost because we didn't know better that we were like, oh, why can't you fund someone based on just data alone? Why can't you just look at their information and, I don't need to really see their pitch deck. I can just fund them if I have their data. So it was kind of that naivety almost that kind of gave us the willingness to try it out. Right?
Yes, it's the best. It's when you bring new eyes into the equation, miracles happen. I love that. And also, it kind of, just to simplify it a little, it kind of reminds me of The Voice, right? I mean, so you can't look at the person, you're looking at their data.
Yeah.
So your unconscious or conscious biases will be not pushed out of the way, yes?
That's right. And, we're now really proud that we fund 8x more women than the traditional VCs, as well as 30% of our portfolio are BIPOC founders. But we didn't.
Let's say that one more time, everybody. 30%?
Yes, 30% of the portfolio.
It's BIPOC founders. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. truthfully, we didn't kind of set out our mission to be like, okay, there's a number on the wall, we need to hit that number. It was, again, kind of more by serendipity. And in hindsight, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like if you just look at, I think we're lucky to be in a nation or a community that it's actually pretty diverse, just by nature, right? And then when you look at the statistics, it doesn't match to the demographic statistics of the population. You're like, oh, well, there's not just 2% women in the community. That doesn't make sense, right?
But this is the proof in the pudding. When you have a diverse team and a diverse board, you're going to have diverse voices, which are then going to allow you to be diverse in who you serve and serve diverse communities, right?
That's right. That's right. So when we kind of set out, it was really around the idea of, without looking at, because a lot of these kind of unconscious biases creep in, right? Like the job of a VC, it's human nature. Whether you are a VC, whether you are a loan officer at a bank, or whether you're kind of, me as an angel investor, you have these biases that it's almost kind of innate from who we are and our backgrounds. And whether you like it or not, it will creep into your kind of decision making. And a lot of the judgment calls that you make as so I was reading up on the history of kind of how loan officers worked for banks back in the day, and it's very much similar. You get to, it's kind of like a VC where you see someone's business plan, you look at the data, and then you make a judgment call on whether you should give this person a loan or not. And naturally, biases, unconscious biases kind of creep into that. So a lot of what we thought was, well, what if we have enough data nowadays to remove that piece of that middle step, right? You kind of piece together what the business really looks like just based on the data. So we connect to Shopify for e-commerce companies. We connect to the Facebook and Google data to see their marketing. And you get a pretty good picture of how their business is ran. And naturally, you could just, based on that, if it's a good business with good fundamentals, we fund it. And if it's not, then, well, we won't be able to fund it. And we'll give the founders that feedback. And you realize that you start to reflect more of what the community looks like rather than just a small percentage.
It's so wonderful. And unlike the banks, you're perhaps a little more credit risk positive. I'm just trying to figure out how that works. I was a commercial lender back in the day. Yes. After I earned my MBA in '89, I went into banking, not because I was a fit everybody. I just wanted to learn how bankers thought, and I wanted to crunch numbers. That's what you do a lot, is you crunch numbers in all types of industries, and I love me some numbers, but I was not a fit, and I was barely made it 3 years. Anyway, so I understand the credit risk that's involved when you're doing debt, capital for folks, and you're looking at receivables, turnover, and you're looking at assets, and you're looking at ways to make it work, maybe securing with some marketable securities, et cetera. How does that work at Clearco so that they can help these, bootstrapped founders who are building that business, and perhaps they got some great traction? What are some of the filters for that?
Yeah, we do look at very much similar things. It's very much all the kind of the risk ratios for the different metrics of business, what the margins look like, what is the return for every dollar spent on ads. We look at all of that as well. But instead of kind of pattern matching, with our eyes and kind of with financial statements, it's very much just fed through our system, right? So we learned very quickly that all the things that we pattern match ourselves and we call rules I guess nowadays we have computers that are powerful enough to just codify the rules that we kind of in our head really think about when we look at a business one by one. And as a result, we're able to kind of process and kind of underwrite a customer much quicker.
Right. And this is, to me, very fascinating, because a lot of folks don't know that this is an option, and they don't understand that you're using your data system, that you've got a way of filtering. They give you this information and you're able to filter it through, and it spits it out and it says, okay, here we go. Are your terms, what are the terms usually on these types of instruments, financial tools?
So I think the classification, we sit somewhere between traditional debt that requires some kind of physical asset to be secured against, and kind of also the more traditional equity, where it's you have to give up a share of your company. And most of the businesses that we serve are digital businesses.
Yeah.
A lot of e-commerce, but digital SaaS as well. Digital businesses by nature, where to be honest, they're asset light, right? They don't have a factory or
Right.
kind of an oven.
They're not cleaning the ocean.
And it's good, right? These are asset-like businesses that
Right.
are actually great businesses. Yet, when you look at from a pure financial statements asset balance sheet perspective, you're like, oh, well, there's not many assets there. I was like, well, they're meant to be asset-light, and these are fantastic digital businesses. So we basically look at future revenue. We look at future margins. So it's revenue-based financing, where we look at what that might, how the business might do into the future, and based on that information, we could give capital today. And our terms, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, your terms?
Yeah, our terms kind of range anywhere from as little as $10,000 to $10 million. And the reason we have such a broad range is because for us, goes back to the fundamentals. We look at whether the business is performing, whether they have good return on ad spend, whether they have good margins and good economics. And if that's the case, then there's no reason we shouldn't fund it.
Right.
And as a result, we have, we're proud that we fund very diverse founders as a result.
I love that. And I love that you guys get really clear about who you wanted to serve, the digital space. Was that something you knew right up front, e-commerce, Internet of Things, et cetera, or SaaS, I mean? Yeah.
I guess it's one of those, like, in hindsight, it's painfully obvious that we should have done this from the start, but it took us a number of years to get to where we were, and a lot of pivots and mistakes and lessons learned. So we didn't start off with e-commerce. We started off with actually in the gig economy. We worked with kind of freelancers, gig economy, and then we moved on to kind of vacation rental out of all places. So we had a number of different places. Yeah, where we finally understood and learned that e-commerce and digital businesses made a lot more sense, and our capital could be a lot more useful for these type of founders.
This is terrific. Folks, seriously, I mean, you know how well-known and revered Clearco is today, but they started off, let's try this, let's try that. Oop, that didn't work. This is how it is. And if you can stay afloat, you're going to finally figure out your sweet spot. So what did it happen? Like, what was that day like when y'all went, oh my gosh, this is where it's going to work best for us? What was that like?
A lot of experimentation and a lot of iteration. And I think this is also the other thing, right? And Ande, I'm sure you've seen many startups, so you know this journey, but it's common to, in a TechCrunch article, it's always portrayed as like, there's this, it's like, voila, right? Day 334, something happened and we figured it out. Well, in reality, it's a number of these little mistakes or little iterations and experiments that we consistently learn. And I guess in hindsight, we're like, oh yeah, I guess we should have seen this coming. So a couple of big lessons that we learned along the way. One was that it goes back to the business's fundamentals, and our capital is most effective for companies that are kind of capital dependent businesses. So businesses where if we give them $1, they could take that dollar and make $2 out of it. And one of the most obvious ones is digital e-commerce businesses, where they can take that dollar, spend it on Facebook and or marketing, and they'll get more sales, right? And it didn't make sense that 40% of venture capital dollars, when you raise venture capital, goes straight towards Google and Facebook. It's not the best use of
You don't want to give up equity for that, folks.
Exactly.
I love that. Okay, so don't worry. Oh, this is what I love. I'm a phonetic learner. Thank you, Cinecon. We're going to get to your question. No worries. And hey, LinkedIn user, thank you for saying hi. Again, sometimes LinkedIn doesn't share your name or face, so pop your name in the comments so I can say woohoo and yay to you. And thank you for sharing that. It's a great story. And I can't bring up this one, though. I think this is a good question for right now from Cinecon. I focused all my financial resources on product, and we're at MVP and in beta, but need to pivot to build my business and get more traction. Any suggestions on best practices? I guess we need to know what kind of an MVP, right? What kind of product? Is it hairspray or is it digital? Or product? I don't know. I'll wait for Cinecon to put that in there. But you all had to raise capital, and I don't know how much you were part of that, or if maybe Michelle or Andrew were the ones leading the charge on that. But what was that like? Because you did some serious capital raising, which you needed to do in order to provide these financial instruments for founders. First of all, I just would love to know initially, what were some of the questions that founders asked you that I'm sure that you've taken forward in your own investing? Like how did they grill you? How did they rake you across the coals when you told them what you wanted to do?
Yeah, and it's funny to remember that the world looked very different 6 years ago when we first started. I think Bitcoin prices were $300. It was a very different world. And at that time, revenue-based financing, or the idea of kind of alternative financing for startups, was not that mainstream, right? All the buy now, pay laters, the Affirms of the world, we haven't seen them, and the idea that we came up was it was, I would say, it has some reception, but it wasn't that receptive, and we were very thankful for the investors that did believe in us and actually did invest in us. But we got a lot of no's and rejections along the way. I think from the outside, a lot of people look at us and we're like, oh, you've raised a lot of money. But each round when we raise, we still get like 90 no's to more, actually, I think, depending on how many pitches we do, 100 and something. Yeah. So like 90% plus no's at the very least. And it's painful, to be honest, right? Especially when you're talking to investors that definitely has their prior successes before. They're entrepreneurs or investors that you admire, and they're funds that you admire. And they give you, to be honest, really good reasons on why this is not going to work. You're like, oh, that's a great point.
Right. And also, I want to talk about something, because I don't think people talk about this enough, Charlie, which is, then you raise that big bag, okay? And it can be 10, 20, 50 million, right?
Yeah.
That's huge pressure. I don't care if it's you're spreading it out over 5 people, right? Or 10 people, as far as, owners in the business. You are now expected to reach numbers. You have a shorter runway for, showing results. Oh my gosh. How did that affect the team as far as the pressure of having that responsibility of OPM, other people's money, now in the business, and you had to perform?
Yeah. And I think through that experience really made us come to more appreciation about the use of capital and how much capital to raise and where best to get that capital.
Yeah.
And I think that's some of the advice that I give to both founders that I invest in from an angel capacity, or founders that we support at Clearco, is very much, figure out what you want to do first, and then try to figure out what capital sources you need for, right? So for example, if you need marketing dollars, equity, you might not need it, depending on how much revenue your business is generating. If you're building something from 0 to 1, let's say it's a new innovation, a new AI model, then you might need that equity capital. And that's something we think a lot about, is like matching the capital source and the type of capital to the right business model or the right business proposition. So yeah, and I definitely agree with you. It's when you have a lot of capital, it's more pressure.
It really is, folks. So I just want to throw that out there, because I've seen founders become paralyzed. They were really good at raising, and they actually had to start, oh my gosh, it's so hard. And also the cap table, right? It becomes diluted. You start seeing numbers, and while, you may have successfully raised all of this, all of a sudden your ownership becomes a fraction. this is a really tough ball game. And I think you guys did a great job at Clearco in figuring that out. And I'm so grateful you shared some of these stories along the way, because now, folks, you look at Clearco and you hop on there and you click that fund me button and you see everything going on. That took years for them and lots of mistakes for them to get to this place. But boy, are they a terrific resource and tool and unique way for you to solve your capital challenges. Our businesses need money. It's oxygen for the business. So you're going to get it from your customers, debt financing or equity, but you got to get the money in. So now let's turn the page, so to speak, and let's talk about Charlie, the investor, because you are one of my favorite type of investors. You're an operator investor. And yes, I have a bias, everybody. I like operator investors because they've been in the seat of a founder, right? There are so many, okay, I'm getting on my soapbox here. There's lots of VCs out there who have some wonderful pedigrees and all, but they have never founded a business. They have never had to go through all the harrowing roller coaster ride. 1 minute you're popping the champagne, the next minute you're crying into it type of experiences. Operator investors, however, have been there. So they have a deeper appreciation. And in my opinion, they bring a lot more value to the game. So that said, that's just Andy's advice there. So let's bring it back to Cinecon's incredible question about his MVP. We'll just bring it back up again. His question was, I focused all my financial resources on product and we're at MVP and in beta, but need to pivot to build the business and get more traction. And he's asked any suggestions on best practices. And then he provided us more details. His is a marketplace for security services. So think Uber for bodyguards and security guards, private investigators, risk management consultants, etc. Cinecon, I'm seeing a really great TV show, just saying. With that, I love that. So it's kind of on-demand security or investigators. Wow.
That's really cool. I like that.
Sharing that it's called bodyguard.io. Wow. And so the question is, how do you get the traction? And well, Cinecon, we had our last guest was the PR, leveraging PR to get more visibility and credibility and traction. What are your thoughts, Charlie? Are we looking at advertising on Facebook, Google Ads, things like that?
Yeah, there's a number of different things you could do here. And I think it sounds like you're at a spot where you've I think a lot about building startups or that early stage is kind of like it's a game of experimentation, right? It's kind of like I like the analogy of poker because you have a certain number of chips, which are your resources, and you're placing bets, right? You're saying, hey, I'm going to try out this iteration or this version. You learn something about it, and then you might lose it, or you might gain some, and then you place another bet. And so it sounds like to me that you might have depleted most of your resources. But you've got to something that very few people get to, which sounds like you have some degree of an MVP and you believe there's some degree of a product market fit with that MVP. I think one of the traps that I believe in that people fall into is kind of trying to accelerate when you're at that stage when you found your product market fit, right? What I would actually advise is oftentimes to focus a little bit more on a fewer customers and start. So there's two things you could do. At the end of the day, kind of like as Andy said, money is oxygen for startups, right? Cash is oxygen. So you need to raise the capital somehow. You could raise it from investors. You could raise it from alternative sources, whether that be a bank or something like Clearco, or you could raise it from customers. And if the investors are not an option, or if that's more difficult to get, I would usually parallel path both. So I would think about investors, whoever you could think could get more capital. But then the other part if we're talking about more the bootstrapping way, is how do you essentially raise the capital from your customers? And when I think about how to charge customers capital, I think about who who among my current beta customer list, or maybe customers that I'm currently working with or in talks with, feels the biggest pain point from what I'm serving.
Right.
And one of my first mentors out of Boston taught me was, you want to be serving penicillin, not vitamins. And so find the ones that really has that pain point. Just pick a couple and build, like, I guess instead of kind of going broader, what I'm saying is focusing more on those 2-3 customers in your beta group or the people you know, and charge them capital, and then slowly expand from there. So that's kind of how I like to think about it when I run into.
Yeah, I love that advice, Charlie. I also think that you can find one group too that might be needing your services the most, and maybe it's a community. So Cinecon says, thank you. I started Bodyguard to help stop anti-Asian hate crimes. But when I narrowed my market down to women, I started building this app with my own 2 hands because I wanted to help vulnerable women. Oh,
that's a great cause.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Cinecon. Continue to stay in touch, okay? And let us know how you're making out. And if anybody's watching this, reach out to Cinecon at bodyguard.io. And it's Bodyguard with an I, BODIGUARD, with any advice that you have, because we're all here to add wind to each other's sails in the Startup Life Live community and help folks move forward. So what prompted you to become an angel investor, and an operator investor? How did you start? Like, I know you're part of Fog Ventures, correct?
Yes. It's a group of kind of operators. Yes.
And that makes me very happy. We have a great group here in Boston called TBD Angels, led by David Chang, and I just love it, love it, love it. And did you find a team that made you happy, or how did you land in that position of where you wanted to start now helping founders out through investments?
Yeah, it initially started with really just a combination of whether it's friends of mine or people I knew, as well as ex-Clearco employees who were like, okay, I'm going to go start something new, and wanted to encourage that. So that was kind of my first couple of checks.
That's great.
And that's how I got started. I didn't have a fund or anything. And I think that's perhaps why, it's not like I have a mandate or a return I need to hit. It's my money. And basically it's more so to support, kind of give back, combination giving back, hoping for a return, of course, and supporting kind of the community. And I think one of the things that I enjoy, or I like doing as an angel, is that it's kind of as found, because like you mentioned, Ande, that you've lived the other side as a founder or as an operator. I try to encourage a lot around kind of believing yourself, like believing the founder, because that's why you invest at an early stage, and try to encourage the founders to go out and try and experiment those audacious ideas, try them. And I'm a proponent of experimenting, and I guess it's not so much what I see. Like I guess I'm not encouraging continuous failing. Like I think failing is okay. Failing doesn't mean you succeeded. I mean, it means you failed. But what it means is that if you continuously experiment and failures, you encourage that failures is okay, then eventually you should hit something that works, right? And the trick is to essentially budget or measure up your experiment so you have enough kicks at the can such that you will succeed.
Right.
And I do think failing is a byproduct of success. So you have to keep trying.
And so as an angel investor now, you're going to be on people's lists, right? When they reach out.
Yes.
And one of my favorite founders, oh my gosh, Charlie, she had an IG story over the last 24 hours that I just loved. Her name is Lauren Rochelle Shanks. She's the founder of Keep Wondering Out Loud, which is a talent development platform that fosters inclusion within remote and hybrid and in-person teams, just to help keep people really stay connected. And in her IG story, she talked about how she spent the last really 4 months knowing that she was supposed to reach out to investors. And instead she kept redoing her pitch deck, nailing down her numbers, doing everything except calling anybody. And she was so transparent, so honest. And then she said, you know what? I finally bit the dust today. And I said, bit the bullet. I'm mixing my metaphors. And I started calling, and you know what? I got meetings from my first 4 outreaches. And then she took us on the whole journey of what it was like when she started to call on folks. It is hard. She procrastinated for months and actually got meetings from her calls. What do you like to hear or see? How would you like a founder to reach out to you, especially when there's no warm introduction? I mean, as you know from your own experience, we just don't all have the connections that Wall Street and VC firms and wealthy people have in getting the leverage they need.
Yeah. And before I get to that, what you mentioned, I love her story. It's I do it all the time. When you mentioned about the procrastination, hits home, both from a fundraising or finding investor perspective, as well as calling up customers. Right? It's
right.
Like oftentimes like, oh, let me just polish up the landing page a little more. Let me change up the code a little bit more, and it's a form of procrastination. And I do it all the time. But yeah, you can catch yourself doing that. And I think with fundraising, similar to talking to customers, it's almost like a product market fit. Once again, it's trying to find the right value proposition where whatever you're offering, the business idea, attracts a certain type of investors, right? And it's okay that most investors will say no, and that's almost like part of the game. You just have to keep talking to more. You got to keep talking to more customers until a few will say yes, and they have a need for the product you have. And I think for those who, a friend of mine really did a great job at this. And what they did was that they didn't have that kind of robust, whether it's kind of the pedigree or just knowing the right people on Wall Street. They went to their customers. And those are a fantastic group of people to tap into because, well, A, they know what exactly your product is, and they're using it, they're paying for it, so they must like it.
Yeah.
And every single one, and I think goes back to the story that it's not about it's not just about getting an intro to a VC. It's also about the quality of that intro. So the quality of an intro from a customer who's saying, hey, I'm paying this person money and I'm like, this is a great product, goes a lot longer or a lot further than kind of a cold intro or an intro from somewhere else.
I'm having to stitch that on a pillow moment, everybody. Seriously, take that in what Charlie just said. It's not just the intro, it's the quality of the intro. And that is really, I think, on the founder's shoulders, right? They need to do their homework. They need to understand that this investor will happily, or their history of investing is in this category. So if you're in food, you're not going to go to someone who only invests in SaaS, okay? You're going to go to someone who you know has been at least in a consumer product world, and ideally food. Yes?
Yep.
And so, what else can founders do to better their chances as far as finding that right introduction, that aligned introduction? And what worked for all of you at Clearco in finding the right investors, or sometimes maybe not the right investor?
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, we had so many rejections and kind of the scar tissue to show for it. And I think there's two combinations, right? You need to build a list before you go. A couple of common kind of fundraising advice. One is build up that list before you start, because you do want to build a bit of that, for a lack of better words, I guess, FOMO, or that kind of that pent-up demand, if you will. So you want to have most of your investor calls in a short duration or period of time. And one of the things too that becomes almost like a trap, because fundraising, when you're fundraising, you're not building your business, right? And it is a bit of a distraction in a way. So you don't want to be fundraising for 6 months or a year. You want to kind of get it over with in a way, as
so you can get back to work.
Get back to work, getting back to building the business, right? So you almost want to build up that list of people you're going to reach out to or intros you could get before you start. Now, in terms of getting intros, you have your own Rolodex. You can go on LinkedIn. There's a great tool where you find second or third degree connections and just ask. I think that's oftentimes an underrated. Just find someone that you're like, oh, you're connected to this person. And you'd be surprised how far your third degree connections go. And add your customers to that, and that really expands, right?
And have a blurb ready, everybody. Make it super simple for someone to share your information and connect them.
Yes.
Because, and I'll never forget when Mandela Shoemaker Hodgdick said, and she's the founder of Founder Gym, said this, which is, you copy somebody on an email to me in an introduction, it's like bringing a stranger to my home and knocking on the door and saying, hi, here we are.
Yeah.
So make sure that you go through the protocol, which is to have a nice, clear, concise blurb about, your elevator pitch, whatever it is, that this person can then send to the other person and get permission in order to make the introduction, because now you've got a really nice, warm introduction. You've made it so easy for that second and third person. What are your thoughts, Charlie?
I couldn't agree more. I didn't mention that. That's a great piece of advice. Affordable blurb, that's easy, right? Because if you think about it I'll just selfishly talk about it from my perspective, I get a lot of these requests, and it's essentially asking me to spend 20 minutes to write up an email. It's not that long, but when you have, let's say, 10 of them, that's like a whole day of writing emails, right? And I don't know your business as well as you do. I would have to basically figure out, okay, what is the value prop of your business? How does that match to the investor you want me to make an intro to? And I need to carve out, I also don't want to make a fool out of you or myself, right?
Right.
So I need to write a smart email to that person who might be a friend of mine. But if you could do all the homework for me,
yes,
write up affordable blurb.
Yes.
It makes that from a 20-minute work to a 30-second work, right? It's very, very easy.
I love it. Brent, thank you for putting your question up here. I meant to bring it up earlier. Brent is asking, how do we get people with disabilities in the startup world? This is, for example, we have a gentleman here in Boston who was injured in a biking accident and paralyzed from the waist down. And so he shows up, in his chair that goes at all different levels. Oh my gosh, he's so much fun. And his whole business is about, of course, making places more accessible. Also, we have folks who have hearing challenges, sight challenges. But, for example, later, or I think in early February, we've got Rebecca coming on who can barely see. And she talks about her new tech company to help those who are like seriously visually impaired and et cetera. What are your thoughts about that, Charlie, about getting more other abled folks into the startup scene?
I think that's fantastic. And it's very much in line with kind of what we're trying to do too, right? Which is that I believe like the reason we started Clearco is because I think the best entrepreneurs or the best founders are those who can really relate to the problem they're solving. Right? Yeah. It's not like I looked at I won't bash McKinsey, but I looked at a McKinsey report or a big statistic, and I'm like, I want to solve this problem because it's a big number, right? But I think the best products are built by those who truly has that founder empathy and they get it.
Absolutely.
And we hope to kind of, and that's kind of, what we started Clearco. So can we encourage more BIPOC founders? Can we encourage more founders of a whole wide range? And
and this is why I love your filtering, your data science that you use and technology that you use. And I know I keep bringing it back to the voice, but you're not going to be judged, Brent, on your disability. You're going to be judged on your business model, where you are today, and your ability to grow the business. And I think that is a beautiful way to view the world. That's where the technology is going to filter through what you're sharing, and it will make it much easier versus somebody going right to that unconscious bias. And we certainly see it in our LGBTQ plus community as well. And it's really difficult. Oh, good. You gave Charlie a follow on Twitter. Yes, Twitter Spaces is always great.
Oh.
And LinkedIn
Thank
is
you.
coming in with something too, because everybody knows how I feel about Clubhouse. But anywho, that's another story. And Jeanette says, thank you so much, Charlie, for lots of good advice. I just connected with you on LinkedIn.
Amazing.
Yeah, I know there are going to be a lot of folks reaching out as they check the replay here. And then finally, when someone actually has that opportunity, Charlie, they're in front of you. And folks, remember, I've got a great list of questions from investors and questions for investors. Just email me, Ande@andelyons.com. I'll shoot it over to you. It's so important. Let's just talk just briefly about when someone is actually ready. Of course, we don't do it physically anymore, right? It's got to be Zoom or however. They're pitching their business. What one or two pieces of advice can you give to a founder to feel more confident when they're in front of that investor, especially when it's like, oh, this is the perfect investor. We're so aligned. We're right in their sweet spot. And nope. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah. Well, I guess as an investor, every investor has different lens that they care about. For me, two things I really care about is what I call kind of, well, it's product market fit, but more importantly for me, it's actually founder market fit. And that's why I love Brent's question. And it goes back to
founder what fit?
Yeah, founder market fit.
Yeah.
So is this the right team or the right founder tackling this problem is something I care a lot about, right? If it's going back to Brent's question, right? Like if it's someone that can't really relate to the problem that they're solving, I've often find times that they will eventually get beat by someone who can relate to the problem deeply or at a deeper level. They could build a better product. So oftentimes I'm trying to understand from the founders a lot of the questions you were asking me earlier, Ande, in terms of like, how did you come up with this problem? Like, why does this problem matter to you? And what's the unique insight you have here? So that's something I believe deeply in, the founder market fit. And it's something that I try to basically ask a lot of questions around and see, why do they care about this problem? Because you've been through it many times, Ande. It's a long and windy journey. Definitely a roller coaster at the startup journey. And there'll be a lot of times when we wake up and we're like, why are we doing this? Right? And the ones that succeed are the ones that persevere and they keep pushing forward. Like, oh, let me try this other potential solution. Maybe this time it'll work.
That's right. Or let me be willing to be an observer, folks. This is so important. When you're so personally involved, you're just going to be like, chokehold. But if you can step back and look at it as a science experiment, okay, that didn't work. Let's try this. Let's try this, and remove yourself and be an observer. Your brain will work much better for you. And
I'm looking for that unique insight that they have that other, like someone as an outsider, because I'm not deep into that space, wouldn't know. And kind of that. Tell me a question I ask a lot, like, tell me about something about this space that someone else from the outside would actually disagree with you on because they don't know deeply about this.
And needless to say, I don't think any of you had founder market fit at Clearco.
Yeah, we had an interesting, I should say that's probably one of our strengths at Clearco. Because we were an odd bunch together. We have in our kind of co-founding team, we had ones that were bootstrapping companies. We had ones that have venture funded companies. And we have ones from a technical perspective, we were very heavy into both finance and product and data. An intersection that's kind of rare in fintech. And that's kind of what allowed us to say, we built the first couple of algorithms to say, hey, we could just kind of pull data from these parts and I guess underwrite a business based on that.
So founder market, folks, can also be the transferable skills. So if your team has enough pooled together that can fill that hole, that founder market fit, and Charlie is absolutely right about having that passion, being so lit up about why and remember, it's the problem, not your solution. Passionate about that problem that you're solving, you're going to hit it out of the park with that.
I love that you have a list of questions ready to ask, or that investors might ask. I think that's something that when we were going through Y Combinator, where I'm helping friends prep for Y Combinator reviews, like do that with your friends, right? Before you talk to an investor, you really want to close. Have your friends ask you those difficult questions.
That's right. And
rehearse or go through that.
Here's the one nobody's really ever prepared to answer, okay? The LTV CAC ratio.
Yes.
So folks, please hop over to my Andelicious Advice playlist on my YouTube channel and watch that video. I make it a lot of fun, but you have to know those numbers because they are instrumental, especially if you're raising money that's going into marketing to really lift and give you more traction. You have to know the long-term value, the customer acquisition costs, and that ratio is your marketing ROI. But trust me, many founders, Charlie, are like, I'm just trying to build a business. But anyway, it's important to have those questions. And I also, Charlie, stress that founders need to also ask investors questions. What's your typical check size? What's the turnaround time for making a decision? May I talk to some other companies that you have invested in? So these are really important. All right, I have 2 more questions to ask you, speaking of questions, because it's so important that we always talk about the big picture. All right. First, it's how did you shift your mindset? What is your favorite mindset hack when you were in a moment of doubt, uncertainty, and you knew that you were just sinking? What did you do to shift yourself out of that? What worked for you?
For me, I guess from an activity perspective, I have to kind of like step away, first of all, kind of get myself some breathing room, take a walk, not continue to stare at a screen. So kind of set myself to a different environment. One thing that quote or something that someone mentioned to me that really stuck with me along the years is that everyone is fighting some battle of their life that you don't know about, right? And whether it's you at that time as a founder, but also probably for your customers, probably also for your investors, right? Probably also for your co-founders or your teammates. They're trying to figure out something of their own. And I guess for me, when I put that into perspective, that everyone is kind of the hero of their own story, and everyone is fighting some battle that you don't know about. You kind of realize that my problem is just a problem, and I just need to kind of. It's not like I'm the only one and the whole world is against me. Everyone is kind of trying to figure it out, and it helps me kind of just put into the mindset of we just need to keep at it. Life is hard, but everyone around you is also struggling and making mistakes and figuring it out.
That is precious advice. Thank you for that. Seriously. And finally, entrepreneurship, right? The best personal development program out there. How has this journey as an entrepreneur, now an investor and mentor, served you both personally and professionally, Charlie?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with that statement that entrepreneurship is such a great personal development tool. Or definitely, it's changed a lot of how I look at the world. A lot of my friends are from that kind of from my journey of building companies. And one of the things that I love about entrepreneurship is kind of that freedom that you're kind of given. You don't really need permission, or you're kind of given the permission to. You find a problem in the world, and you could go try and solve it, right? Yeah. And you kind of keep trying. And there's no, especially in today's world, right? There's more tools. You don't even need to know how to code per se to kind of get started on a new product.
That's right.
And it really lowers the barrier to just taking a stab at a problem that you believe should be solved. And that has impacted me a lot, as well as just for me, my favorite part about entrepreneurship or being a founder is that you get to kind of pick who you want to work with, right? And beyond anything in the world, I think that's one thing that I enjoy the most, is that you get to, right? If you join us at a company, it's oftentimes you can't choose who your team is or who your boss is, but it's one of the few career paths where you could pick.
That's right. And everybody will tell you it's not the journey, it's who you're on the journey with.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, Charlie, seriously, I just cannot thank you enough for providing us and sharing with us, not just your startup stories, but your incredible insights for this journey in your unique way. You are a very special human. I have to tell you, I think you're just the finest kind. And I am so grateful that you took time out of your day to share your stories with us, your advice, your insights, your perspective, your point of view, and just more than anything, who you are. So thank you. Do you have any last thoughts before I pop you in the green room?
No, not at all. The pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much, Andy, for having me.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
you for all those questions as well.
Curious minds, right? We want to know. Oh my gosh. Okay. I think you agree with me, of course, that Charlie is a very special person. And it's so great to hear his point of view and experience his entrepreneurship journey through his wonderful startup stories and investor stories. Let me tell you who's coming up on the show next. Yay. Okay. On January 11th, at 12 p.m. EST, we are learning how to effectively lead our startups through a turbulent time with articulate persuasion founder Monique Maley. Before becoming a serial entrepreneur, Monique spent over 10 years acting on Broadway and in film and has used her own thespian skills to help leaders communicate effectively to their teams, to their media, to the investors, all while helping them, folks, talk to yourself. Now, you know that inner dialogue can be some of the biggest challenges. And often during turbulent times, they're caused by the founder. And so Monique and I are going to be talking and diving deeply into this great conversation. She's been at this for a couple of decades. And how do you know when I have a new show? You're joining that meetup group on Startup Life Live meetup group, bit.ly/Startup Life Live. There's a QR code. Links are going to be in the show notes. I'm so grateful you chose to give up this time to tune in live replay. I'm so grateful for your presence. And I know you upped your founder game today with our guest, Charlie Feng. Looking forward to seeing you next time. Stay strong. And oh yeah, remember, okay? You have to remember this. Hold on to this thought that you're braver than you believe. And yep, stronger than you seem. And as we say here in Boston, wicked smarter than you think. Oh my gosh. Until next time, wishing you a delicious day. Mwah. Cheering you on from Boston.